Good evening and welcome to I'm Listening, Stay Connected. I'm Listening is a 24/7, 365 initiative that works to destigmatize mental health. That's what we're trying to do here every night, get people more familiar talking about, asking about, and hearing about mental health journeys and struggles, but also tips and ways to build some resilience. We got a great show planned for you. We have singer-songwriter 2 Feet joining us to talk about his mental health journey and also the different forms of self-care he's engaging in right now. If you want to join the conversation, you can always do so by sending your questions into the Loveline DMs or by tweeting your question with the hashtag I'm Listening, and we'll be answering those throughout the show and also throughout the week. I wanted to open up by talking about relationships. One of the most powerful determinants of mental health is your relational health. In fact, our self-esteem is actually relational esteem. How we feel about ourselves is a reflection back, an accumulation of all the different ways that everything around us and the people around us have told us about our worth. Now, a lot of people are talking about things like work on being on your own or single. We do not have our relational health handled yet. And that we see in the news, where we're seeing people getting spit on, pushed into the water, all different sorts of forms of violence because they're being asked to wear a mask, people calling the cops on each other. So it really shows us how much work we have to do so we can be better relationally. And that is on a macro level, like I'm talking about, just the way we interact with those around us in the world, but also just individually. Look, singledom isn't always the easiest place for us to live, but it is far easier psychologically than being in some kind of relationship with someone, especially romantically. And that's why I have all of my clients, especially right now, on those apps, still trying to date with distance, God bless, learning all different kinds of ways of checking in with each other. But again, our relational health is our mental health. So the best way to work on it is by working on and improving the way we are in relationship to everyone, every single person that's in our lives. So pay attention to that because again, that's how we really do that work. All right, now we're going to be going to our guest, 2 Feet. Welcome to the show. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing really, really, really well.
Hi.
Good to see you. So I always like
Good to see you too. Sorry.
That's okay. We got you.
I'm lagging a little. Okay.
God bless technology. So I always like to.
I know. Yeah.
I always like to start the show by asking people right now during this pandemic how their own mental health is.
I'm sorry. You kind of cut there. I'm gonna move. Just maybe I'll get a bit of better
for sure.
or something.
No
Sorry
problem.
about that.
That's all right. We'll go on a little tour of your place.
Yeah. I apologize.
That's all right. We're getting a home tour. It's like Cribs.
All right. Yeah. All right. Here.
All right. Beautiful. Good backdrop too.
A little better. Okay.
So
you go.
I was just asking you a little bit about your mental health right now during the pandemic. How are you doing?
Some days are better than others. Kind of just take it as it comes. It's obviously sometimes you just kind of overwhelmed with anxiety if you read too much of the news or you have too much time to think can just itself cause a lot of problems. But today I'm doing good. I went on a run, took care of myself a bit, and feel good today.
What are your main forms of self-care? Jogging is one of them. Everyone keeps talking about baking and jogging, and I refuse to do either. What else are you up to?
Well, music, staying creative is, I think, probably more important to me than even being, active, weirdly. Because, you're still being active when you're creative. But, yeah, that's definitely the most important thing to make sure I stay fresh and feel good.
So you described your music making as somewhat meditative, and it's interesting. Like every time I sit down and interview someone, it's fascinating to look at how a time like this is either very motivating creatively or it's quite the opposite. But you said that you've been producing and writing, so it's propelled you.
Yeah, you have that extra time. In some ways, a lot of things are taken off of people's plates. And I've just kind of used it to create. And I don't know. It initially, when everything first kind of started happening, I oddly felt very inspired to write and make stuff and make new music and just have fun or hang out with my friends. Hang out with my friends at least virtually. And so music and being creative is definitely my meditation for the day.
It's beautiful. And so, looking at some of the interviews, also looking at some of your song lyrics, it was really powerful for me to see the heightened level of vulnerability that you bring to your craft. And we don't often see that in our culture. So, where did the confidence come from, if even if it's rooted in confidence, for you to just bear yourself so powerfully?
I think it's more just I kind of need to do it. Like you said, you're not sure if it's rooted in confidence. I mean, sometimes it is. Sometimes I'll write something or second guess myself. Like, should I really say that? It almost feels too personal to put in a song. But a lot of it is just like I need to do it in order to feel healthy. Really, that's kind of where a lot of it comes from, and I'm happy that it seems to help a lot of people too. So.
Yeah, that's the one thing that's been really beautiful doing the show is just seeing what a lifeline music has been, not just for the artist, but also for our listeners as well. And I think it's, I've shared this on another segment where sadly it's left out of psychology. My field, we don't talk about the impact music can have. And just like people yourself, it's your self-care, it's also your career. So have you ever gotten to a point where you wanted to take back anything that you put out?
That's a really good question. Kinda, I guess. Sometimes, it's like sometimes I listen to my lyrics. I'm like, wow, that was really kind of a storytelling moment. I wish I didn't share as much, but like I said, I have people contact me or message me, telling me like the very specific lyrics, things like that specifically impacted them. So sometimes if I have like a vague sense of embarrassment, it's immediately thrown off by just knowing that, someone's getting something out of it. So.
Yeah, somebody's getting something out of it, and God bless technology. Once it's out there, you can't take that back. I mean,
no.
I had moments like that in writing some of the articles I wrote where it's like, once you hand it over to the world, it's like you're giving the world your baby.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So let's talk about legacy. Again, your music is rooted in a lot of vulnerability. There's a lot of storytelling about things that you've been through. And I was looking at an interview where they were asking you about one of the females you reference, and you were kind of like, I don't want to get into that. What do you want your legacy to be? What do you want people to look back or yourself look back and feel like you did with your music?
Well, there's the musical part and then there's the personal part. So I guess musically, I definitely would like people to just take something away from how honest some of the lyrics are, especially like in the song Pink, where I'm talking about like growing up or getting older in the city and seeing like the relationships with my friends and my life changing and stuff like that. So I think something like that, especially with a lot of the new stuff I've been writing, I think, just lyrical honesty would be a good legacy. And then from a personal standpoint is, I'm a musician, but people also follow me and hear other things I say. I'd like them to take like, I'm very honest with my mental health, and I've obviously had a lot of really tough situations. Before I've been hospitalized before on 3 separate occasions actually, and I always share that with my fans. I always tell them how I'm feeling. I do talks, interviews like this as often as I can to try to share like, I was in a really dark place, and it over time it changed and I got out of it, and it wasn't easy. People say, oh, I was in a dark place, and then all of a sudden it's like I'm better now. Like, no, there were weeks and months of hardship, but it did pass, and I still get sad or depressed sometimes, but it comes and goes like anything else. So I think if you're talking about legacy like that, I think it's just I want to make sure that I always share as much as possible and have people have something they can relate to, and I think I'm working on doing that and still doing that as much as possible.
Yeah. So much honesty in that. What I also was moved by, and I thought this was very inspirational, is you were talking about the role that institutional education or academia can have on one's craft. And I know that we live in a time where education is really important, and for some that's a powerful route to go. But for you, it sounded like you found more value in just kind of doing it on your own outside of school. Music,
yeah. I definitely did. I think it's because when you try to take like a creative class in something, it kind of oddly squashes a lot of the creative juices. I don't know. I just felt like there was a lot of rules being set up around music. Like, like You have to go to the, fifth after playing this note, so it sounds jazzy in a certain way. And I wanted to get away from that as much as I could. I just wanted to be me. You know what I mean? So creatively, I think the best thing I did, honestly, was to stop like going to school for music. I think if you're going to make music or if you're going to be creative, you're just going to be creative. No one can really teach you how to do it. You can learn certain lessons, certain technical aspects from school and stuff, but you can't really learn how to be creative. That's something you just have to do and not think about it.
Beautifully said. How's it going trying to be a normal guy? Because that was a quote that I thought was amazing as well. As you said, I'm not so worried about people's thoughts on my music these days. I just want to be left alone to be a normal guy. I kind of feel like that ship has sailed.
Yeah. It comes and goes. Like, I live in New York City. So in New York City, on occasion, someone will come over and say, oh, hey, like, I love your music, yada, yada. But, I guess that ship kind of has sailed. Yeah, it gets increasingly harder. Yeah, I don't think normal guy is really in the future for me, and at least anytime soon.
Yeah, it's kind of gone. So what would you say to fans of yours that are listening and they're going through their own mental health struggles? What kind of message do you want them to take away from this? Because, your journey is one of resilience. Like you said, you've been hospitalized, you've suffered with depression, it's still there, but you still have been able to kind of live in the world in the way you want successfully.
Yeah. I guess I can say what I'd like to say is, it will be hard. There will be days that it's hard, and don't let anyone tell you that there won't be, but you have to always remember things pass, and you won't feel, if you're feeling really depressed now, you won't always feel that way. So don't let it like take up your whole existence. Don't trap yourself into thinking that this is how it's going to be forever, because it absolutely will not. And I think that's just something that is super important that I always want to share with my fans, is that things do get better and things do change, and there's a flow and there's a good and a bad. And, just stick around, because it's not worth, I don't know, especially if you're having any sort of suicidal or, self-harm thoughts or anything like that. Like, be honest, be open with your family, just talk to as many people as you can, listen to music, be creative. Even if you're sad, it will pass. I know it can be really hard, but I'm telling you, it will pass, and you'll have a better day, and, things will change. I promise. I promise.
Beautiful. And coming from someone like yourself, even more meaningful to hear it. And I like what you said is it's a journey. We don't necessarily, quote unquote, get well one day and that's that. It can be kind of circular, but hang in there because things can improve. So I wanted to just talk quickly about the album Pink. I had not heard this said like this before, but you basically were saying it is a thing in and of itself. So please listen to it from front to back. Don't just jump in.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, what I meant by that is, a lot of albums come out and it kind of feels like every song was aiming to be a single. So they just compiled like 10 singles and put it out as an album, which is, there's nothing wrong with that, but mine, especially when I was writing it, I did at least definitely, honestly, almost more sonically than even lyrically. They kind of flow in a way, like I really specifically spent a long time like planning how these songs would flow. I thought about how like the next song I was writing would fit into the previous one. And so it in itself is kind of like the thing. It's not, there's no single to listen to, in my opinion, at least with this album. It's more, I just want you to sit, put it on, chill, do whatever you're doing, cook or, relax, whatever, and just let it kind of play. That's sort of what I meant by that.
It's an experience. I love that. I can put it on and just sit in the bath and know that like I'm on a seamless journey.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah.
So we had a question that came in for you, but before we go to that, I just wanted to quickly ask you about the mental health foundation that you've set up. Tell us about that.
Well, actually, we're still kind of in the works of that.
Okay.
For the I want to kind of say, I'm going to save that a little bit for when I announce it on my socials more. But at the moment, honestly, what I'm working towards too, and which was going to be part of my tours, is a different charity. If you don't mind, I briefly mention. It's for my sister. She has a disease called transverse myelitis, where it paralyzed her from her chest down. And it's a really rare and kind of unknown disease. And it also affects lots of children And when there's a rare disease, there's not usually a lot of funding for it because not enough people have it. And it's really, screwed up that, if there's not a lot of people have it and there's not a lot of money in it and there's not a lot of funding for it. So it's just something that I, was planning on doing, we will do it when the tour comes back, working with Plus One, this campaign, this organization that helps donate some of the money from my tour to the organization, and which was going to help bring, awareness to it. So transverse myelitis, and Plus One is a great organization, and I just wanted to bring that up for a second.
That's really beautiful. Thank you for bringing a spotlight to that. All right. Well, I look forward to hearing about the foundation, though, when that happens for you.
Yes.
We have a question that came in, and this one asks, what sorts of checks and balances or bumpers have you put in place in your day-to-day life in order to slow your negative thoughts or actions before they take hold? That's a big question.
It's a great question, too, because I think that's one of the most, fundamental, like the best things I've kind of figured out how to do with myself. If I start feeling like a cyclical thought, I start feeling really negative and I can't get it out of my head or whatever, I immediately remove myself from the space I'm in. So, and it's the most simplest thing, and it's often incredibly hard to do. So if you're in your house and you have a cyclical thought that won't go away and you feel really negative or you're super anxious and you can't get it out, get out of your house. Go for a walk. The smallest thing, go around the block, call a friend, even if you really don't want to, text a friend, call a family member, just remove yourself from that situation briefly, from the surroundings that you're in, and, take a deep breath and pull your shirt and be like, this is a shirt I'm wearing, I'm comfortable, whatever, walk around the block and just kind of remove yourself from the situation for a second. Honestly, it sounds super simple, but it can be incredibly helpful, and it can also be super challenging. So, that's something I've learned to do, or, still in the practice of learning to do, but it's really helped me a lot.
Thank you for that. Yeah, mental health is a journey, right? We're always doing the best we can. 2 Feet, thank you so much for being a part of the show, and also thank you for everything you're doing.
Thank you so much. Yeah, happy to be here.
Have a beautiful night.
You too. Bye.
I love that, though. Mental health is a journey. It's cyclical. That's what happens sometimes is we think, if I was getting better and I have some of my lower moods return, then wellness is off the table. And often in the stages of change, going backwards or sidestepping is inherently built in. And so we expect it. It doesn't have to happen, but when it happens, it doesn't have to be a sign that something's wrong or something's off. So just kind of stay the course. I want to talk about something that's coming out. It's called the COVID Pass. Oh, yes. Wait for this. Anytime something's going on, technology swoops in. Basically, it's what they're calling a digital health passport. Now, the love, sex, and dating apps are the ones that are getting engaged to this because people are nervous about eventually meeting up. And the app said to themselves, well, these are for people to, get together at some point. So what can we do knowing that we're in a pandemic to make people feel like they can be safer and connect? And that's what's happening. So basically, the apps that want to participate in this, as I said again, digital health passport, you would go get tested for COVID. And upon getting negative results, that medical health record piece would be linked to your dating profile. And then you can make it accessible to those that you want to have access to it so they can know that you are COVID free. Ah, yes, this is the world we're living in now. All sorts of data and health code sharing stuff. All right, we got Dr. Jen Weider joining us. Dr. Jen, how are you?
Good, Dr. Chris. How are you?
I was good. I was excited to sit down and talk to you tonight because I'm sure you saw the news, all the ridiculousness that was happening over the weekend.
Yes.
What was going through your mind? Because as I was watching, and I don't want to call any specific place out because we saw these events happening on the East Coast. It was happening in the Midwest. It was happening up in Toronto. So seeing these large gatherings, it made me start to feel anxious. And I noticed I was washing my hands more. What were your thoughts?
I dipped my head in Lysol after watching that, Chris.
Basically.
I think one of the challenges we're going to face, unfortunately, as a nation is the fact that, we're at a real divide. Our country really is splintered. There are a lot of people feeling that being told to wear a mask by federal authorities, by state authorities, is an affront to their civil liberties. And those are sort of the issues for us compared to other nations that are going to be able to put a lid on this and keep the numbers low. I think it really comes down, Chris, to what you can tolerate as your individual risk. But at the same time, when you're mixing with people and you're not taking the proper precautions, you could potentially be putting other people at risk. And that's what we saw this weekend in many, many cases.
And it's a funky conversation to have with yourself, your loved ones, your family members. Because again, some people are self-isolating with others, some are on their own. And it's been coming into my practice a lot. And on one hand, some of it's a mental health concern. On another hand, it's not at all. And I'm having that conversation with a lot of my patients in my practice via telemedicine, but they're asking like what is safe to do and what's not safe to do. Now, the Department of Health in St. Louis asked everyone that was out this weekend in the Ozarks to please take and quarantine for the next 2 weeks. So they're taking that very seriously. But this kind of dovetails into my next topic, which is with the questions that are being asked and what we saw over the weekend, people are wanting to start to kind of venture back out into the world. And I had 2 people ask me today about travel and flight. So knowing that you're a parent, knowing that you're also an MD, knowing that you're tracking the news, what do you say to anyone in your life that wants to maybe travel right now or get on an airplane?
Well, and that's the thing. I think people really need to proceed with caution. We spoke about this a little last time we spoke, but there was this viral picture that went live on Instagram of a doctor who was volunteering his time from the West Coast from San Francisco. And he came over to New York City on a plane with United that was a free flight for him and a lot of first line responders. And then on his way home, the promise was that United was going to provide a situation where they would social distance on, in the air as much as possible, remove that central seat, or at least not have anyone sit there. Mandatory masks and also gloves for flight attendants, including passengers. Because again, it's not just the passengers that are at risk, it's the flight crew and the flight attendants as well. So I would be cautious, and I will be cautious personally about flying. I have the luxury of not needing to fly for work, so it becomes a little bit tricky. The issue is, here is this industry, Chris, that really has been hemorrhaging, right? It's like an industry that has been one of the hardest hits by this pandemic and this lockdown. And the airlines really need to take these precautions very seriously. And those pictures we saw just a week ago, people walking around without a mask, of the masks, down around their neck, it's just not going to go. And in other countries like South Korea and Singapore, where these are just mandatory guidelines by the country, that's what we need to see in this country. If we knew that all of these guidelines would be followed, then I think it's safer. The question is someone lowering their mask on the flight? Are we going to be packed in like sardines, shoulder to shoulder, with people in the middle seat be taken? The question remains to be seen. But again, if you look at this study, Chris, out of UCLA, and this was pre-Memorial Day, about a week before, asking American people if they'd be comfortable flying, 40 to 60%, and that's a big shift there, said they would not, even with restrictions lifted. So I think the industry is going to have a tough time coming back. People are going to fly. If you look post 9/11, where we felt like the airplane industry was in big trouble, it came back about 3 months later. But we need those secure protocols put in place, the health and hygiene protocols, and it needs to really come from a higher level, whether it's the FAA, the federal government, the CDC, whoever it is. They need to be non-negotiable guidelines, I think. And at that case, I would feel better flying than without these willy-nilly guidelines.
Because that's what it does feel like, a little willy-nilly, and it's almost like airline by airline. And it's also, there's like this cultural difference, because I was talking to a friend up in Canada, and they said, we're not needing laws locally mandating that we wear masks in public, because we all just naturally are. He's like, you can't find someone not wearing one. And I said, oh, well, come down to LA, because like every other person's not wearing one here. Yes. So it's interesting on that level too, but it's that personal decision, I guess, of risk for yourself, but also trying to hold space for the fact that you're impacting others and what risk do you want to put them at.
Absolutely. And I have had the same conversation with Canadians. And I think the problem with COVID-19 in the United States is it's been politicized since the beginning. And it's a rift. And there are people on one side or the other feeling that this is, politics. And it really isn't. This is a disease that affects Republicans and Democrats and people that are, from all walks of life, no matter what your party affiliation is. Even an independent is affected by this, unfortunately. And we need to work together as a society. I wish we looked more like Canada, because I'm very envious with the fact that, they're looking out for each other in a way that it doesn't have to be hammered home every time somebody isn't wearing a mask.
Yeah, because every time I see someone not wearing a mask, I think this is just going to get dragged out longer, and I'm ready to get my life back as soon as possible.
Yeah. And especially if you have a healthcare worker, like I do in my house, it's a risk for all our healthcare workers as well. So I agree with you 100%.
Well, thank you as always for your time. And please give your husband a big thank you because I know he's out there on the front lines.
Thank you, Chris.
And have a beautiful night.
You too.
It's so interesting to watch the news. I feel like every day there's a fascinating story as to how we're all managing this. So again, let's be thoughtful and very loving and remember that we are impacting those around us. Tomorrow night, we got another great show planned for you. We got OG Queer Eye Jay Rodriguez going to join us. So it's going to be a great show. You can check out all past episodes of our show on all the different radio.com handles. If you have a question, you can tweet it at #I'mListening or slide your questions into our Loveline DMs. 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Standard tomorrow night live. Join us. Thanks for hanging out with me. And you all have an awesome and beautiful night.